be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. The apostles gathered together with Jesus and reported all they had done and taught. He said to them, "Come away by yourselves to a deserted place and rest a while." People were coming and going in great numbers, and they had no opportunity even to eat. So they went off in the boat by themselves to a deserted place. People saw them leaving, and many came to know about it. They hastened there on foot from all the towns and arrived at the place before them. When he disembarked and saw the vast crowd, his heart was moved with pity for them, for they were like sheep without a shepherd. And he began to teach them many things. The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord. As I reflect on things, I think the older I get, the more nostalgic I tend to get. I think back on days gone by, and I fondly remember my childhood growing up on the family farm in Menominee, about an hour west of here. As I think back on it, I just recognize how simple life was and how good it was. We were safe and we were sheltered. We were dairy farmers, but like many other people in those days, you had a lot of different animals, a variety of animals on the farm. Oh, we had the cows, of course, but we also had pigs and chickens and ducks, lots of cats, dogs, and even at one time we had sheep. Now, we were not shepherds. We were only farmers who dabbled in caring for the sheep. And honestly, I can't remember a whole lot about what it took to care for the sheep because my dad gave up on the experiment. He sold them when I was young, maybe 7 or 8, something like that. But what little I do remember about the sheep was a good memory. I liked them. I mean, they were gentle animals. They were unassuming. They were approachable. You could come up close to them and they didn't seem to mind. Recently, I was at my mom's house, and she was going through all her old pictures, and she got a lot of pictures. And I came upon one when I was very little, very young. It's a picture of me. Mom must have taken it, but it's taken from behind me, and I'm young. I mean, I'm like 6 years old, and I think it's a good thing it was taken from behind me because it probably have that dopey look on my face I always had, and then my buzz haircut, you could see that, from behind. And I'm sitting underneath this shade tree in the farmyard, and alongside me is a sheep. And the sheep's laying down there, and I'm kind of, sitting down on my knees there alongside it, and I got my arm right around resting on the sheep, and things are good. We were comfortable. We were enjoying each other's company, sharing the shade, and it was a nice moment that my mom saw and caught on her little camera back then. If you paid attention to the readings today, you would find there is a strong message in the readings about sheep and about shepherds more directly. Now, my limited experience with sheep does not qualify me to speak about what it's like to be a shepherd, but I did a lot of research on it and found out some interesting things. This theme of shepherds and sheep, it happens a lot in the Bible. It starts right in the beginning and goes to the end. In the very beginning, in Genesis, we hear about the first shepherd who was Abel, Adam's son. And shepherding, we find out, was the chief occupation of all the early patriarchs of the day, like Abraham and Jacob, and even Moses. He was a shepherd when he was away from Egypt. And the Bible mentions shepherding and shepherds some over 200 times. It's a big theme. And we hear about shepherds doing different things like leading sheep to pasture and water, protecting them from wild animals. And they even took care of the sheep by carrying the lambs in their arms. In biblical times, if you had sheep, you were probably pretty wealthy, because it took a lot to accumulate a herd of sheep, and they did a lot for you. Certainly they provided food, but they provided milk to drink. They provided their hides, which was made into clothing, and even a lot of hides put together could make a tent. Furthermore, they used sheep a lot in the sacrificial offerings. The book of Leviticus prescribes all the offerings that they should have, the Israelites should have. And sheep were used as burnt offerings, sin offerings, guilt offerings, peace offerings. Like I said, the Bible has the theme of shepherd and sheep from beginning to end. In the New Testament, it starts with Jesus' birth. And Luke's gospel talks about the shepherds being the first ones to visit the newborn Christ child. And all the way to the end of John's gospel, when Jesus says to Peter to feed his lambs and to feed his sheep. And he goes on from there to St. Paul, talking to his early church leaders about being good shepherds. In those days in early Palestine, the duties of a shepherd were not that easy. You would think sheep are easy to kind of follow, get you to follow them and herd around, but there was a lot of work to it. In the early morning, the shepherd would get up and he would lead his flock. He would go in front of them, and they knew his voice and they would follow him. And he would take them and find the spot where they were to be pastured, where they could graze, find some good grass to eat. That was not easy, because in the Middle East, and particularly in those areas of Palestine, there's a lot of areas that are more mountainous, a lot of areas that are pretty arid, pretty dry, pretty deserty, and it's not always easy to find good places for your herd to graze. Likewise, finding water was a challenge. The shepherd would have to find a place where a well was that had troughs that he could draw water and pour it into the troughs so the sheep could drink, or he had to know where the streams were, where the little springs were, places that he could lead his sheep where they could drink on their own. And at the end of the day, if you thought his work was done, it was not. He would bring his sheep back in to the place that he had, his little kennel, shall we say, his little pen. And he would stand at the door as he guides his sheep in, and he would count them one by one to make sure that he didn't lose any of his sheep. And if he would lose one, he would stop everything at once and go and find the one that was missing. Like Jesus' parable about the lost sheep. This was very common. They understood that you just didn't lose one. You just didn't say, I got more, I'll forget about this one. You always kept track of your sheep. So when you got them in at night, you had to be careful too. You had to make sure your gates were secure, your pen was solid. You had to watch for the wild animals. Who knows what wolves were wandering around out there. And you had to sleep with your rod and your staff there handy to beat them off should they come to attack. And even a thief could come in the night and steal your sheep because they were valuable. They were worth something. So it took a lot of work. It took a lot of diligence to be a good shepherd, to take care of your sheep. Now in our first reading today, we hear about Jeremiah, and Jeremiah is a fiery guy. He's not afraid to call a spade, and he calls the shepherds of his day out who are not doing a good job. He says, "Woe to the shepherds who mislead and scatter the flock of my pasture. You have not cared for them, and I will punish you for your evil deeds." He's obviously found some leaders. They're probably political leaders he's talking about, maybe church leaders, I don't know. But he's calling them out saying, you got a flock entrusted to you, and you're not doing a very good job of taking care of them. He says in the voice of the Lord, I will appoint shepherds who will shepherd them well, so that they no longer need to fear and tremble, and none of them will be missing. So Jeremiah foreshadows what Jesus will act as the good shepherd. Our psalm today was Psalm 23, probably the most well-known psalm there is out there, one of great comfort, one of great peace. We hear it a lot at funerals. The Lord is my shepherd, there is nothing I shall want. Most everybody knows those words by heart. It was written by King David, another shepherd along the way. And some of the qualities of that shepherd, taking his sheep to verdant or green pastures so they can rest. The good shepherd protecting his flock from the valley of darkness. I will not fear because you are with me with your rod and your staff. The good shepherd shows great concern for his sheep, guiding them, leading them, and he is intimately interested, involved with his flock. The good shepherd is willing to sacrifice his own comfort by staying up at night to guard them and protect them, and he'll even give his own life for the sake of the sheep. And that's why Jesus is the good shepherd. In the gospel, he saw these people coming to him. They were coming and coming. He was tired. His disciples were tired. They wanted to get away. They wanted to get to a quiet place, a place where they could rest. But the people would have none of it. They knew where he was going. They found out. They went on foot, ran ahead of him, and got there first. And he saw them and said, I guess there'll be no rest today. He pitied them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. He knew they needed guidance. He knew they needed his words. He knew they needed his shepherding. We all need good shepherds. Of course, Jesus is the model, the ultimate shepherd, but we also need other leaders who will point us to God and emulate Christ. The way that Jesus is the good shepherd is how he protects us. He protects us, he places us under his care. He guides us and shows us a better way to live. And of course, he lays down his life for us, like he did on the cross, showing his ultimate love and concern for us, his sheep. And he still guides us. He rose again, ascended into heaven, and he intercedes for us with the Father. And even though he's not here physically in the flesh, he is still there to be our guide, to be our intercessor with God the Father. And we need him. We need his heavenly guidance, but we need earthly shepherds too. We need good leaders to lead us on the way to salvation. And in this day, it's easy for us to be critical of the shepherds who are appointed to us. Political shepherds, religious shepherds, whatever they may be. And I catch myself doing this too. I'm as guilty as the next guy of criticizing leadership. They have hard jobs. Instead of being critical of them, we need to pray for them. We need to pray that they will rely on Jesus to lead them, to lead us. So remember that when you want to be critical. Pray for our shepherds. Pray for all our shepherds, our bishops and priests especially. They need our prayers. The devil's always after them. He's always trying to lead them into a bad place. Pray for their strength. But remember this too. All of us, to a certain extent, are shepherds as well. All of us who are parents, we are the shepherds of our children. God has entrusted the kids to us to lead them in right paths. We have to guide them. We have to protect them. So we have a part in this shepherding role as well. And as any parent knows, any parent of adult children, it doesn't stop when the kids leave home and go out on their own. You constantly are parenting the kids. The adult kids always need us as parents, as good guides. So that continues on. And even if you don't have kids, there are people in your lives. There are people that you have a chance to influence, people that you are with a lot, your friends, your coworkers, people who may look to you as a shepherd. And our example in those places is so important. It's up to us to do a good job of being a shepherd of them, leading them closer to Christ. And it doesn't have to be with a lot of evangelization and preaching. It can be by example. It can be by words of encouragement. But we are all called to that shepherding role in one way or another. And I know in this mixed up world, when things look bleak and things look dark, it's easy to think that we are walking alone in the valley of darkness. But it doesn't have to feel like that. We have Jesus with us, the good shepherd, to guide us and to keep us safe. He loves us always. He cares for us. He will never leave us alone. And we know that Jesus, the good shepherd, is worthy of our trust and that we can fully trust in him at all times.